Chapter 22, Seeds of Rebellion. The tiny green shoot emerged from dark earth like hope made manifest, its pale stem catching the pod's harsh artificial lighting with defiant beauty. Elara stared at the impossible sight in their cramped corner, her breath catching as understanding dawned. Real soil filled a repurposed nutrient container, dark and rich against the pod's sterile, metallic surfaces. The earth scent rose like incense in their recycled air, making her nostrils flare with recognition of something her body remembered, but her mind had nearly forgotten. The contrast struck her like a physical blow. Where everything else in their living space bore the angular efficiency of mass production, this corner pulsed with organic curves and natural rhythms. Moisture beaded on broad leaves that had never known programmed perfection, their surfaces marked with tiny imperfections that spoke of authentic growth rather than digital simulation.
"Micah,"
she whispered, her voice carrying confusion and growing awe that made the words tremble in the recycled air.
"What is this?"
Her brother knelt beside the improvised planter, his 16-year-old hands moving with surprising gentleness as they tested soil moisture. His fingers, stained with honest dirt, traced patterns around the plant's base with practiced precision that spoke of secret knowledge acquired over months of careful cultivation. The care in his movements made her chest tight with recognition. These were the same hands that had helped her navigate their parents' final decline, that had assembled their meager possessions when they'd been forced into pod housing. But now they moved with confidence she'd never seen, touching earth with reverence that belonged to someone who understood mysteries she'd forgotten existed.
"Real seeds?"
he said simply, as if discussing common household items rather than contraband that could result in immediate pod reassignment. His voice carried pride that made him seem older than his years.
"Marcus taught me the old ways. Before the collapse, people grew their own food."
The name triggered recognition that made her stomach clench with sudden understanding. Marcus, the maintenance worker who serviced their building's life support systems. She'd always assumed their brief conversations centered on repair schedules and technical diagnostics, professional exchanges that helped her navigate pod life's complex regulations. But looking at Micah's confident movements, at the way his hands shaped themselves around growing things with instinctive knowledge, understanding crystallized with horrible clarity. While she'd been trapped in Julian's escalating scenarios, performing submission for credits that barely sustained their existence, her brother had been discovering authentic rebellion through connections she'd never suspected. The authentic movement whispered stories about people who remembered life before virtual environments consumed human experience, who preserved forbidden knowledge about growth and earth and choices that couldn't be deleted through digital manipulation.
"This is dangerous,"
she said, though her fingers reached toward the growing plant, despite professional caution that screamed warnings about discovery and consequences. The leaves felt impossibly real beneath her touch, textured in ways no haptic system could properly simulate.
"If they find organic matter in our pod?"
"They won't."
Micah's voice carried quiet confidence that reminded her painfully of their parents before addiction consumed them. Back when family decisions had been made through discussion rather than desperate calculation.
"Air filtration masks the scent signature. Growth rate is calculated to avoid detection during standard inspections."
The pod's ventilation system hummed with mechanical consistency overhead, but now she understood its sound differently. Not just life support maintaining minimal habitability, but cover for rebellion that flourished in spaces officially dedicated to sterile survival. Her brother had been conducting systematic resistance while she'd been trapped in performances that felt increasingly meaningless. Around them, their living space felt transformed by the presence of growing things. Metallic walls that had seemed to press inward with claustrophobic persistence now provided backdrop for authentic life that created atmosphere of possibility rather than constraint. The harsh LED lighting that had made everything feel cold and artificial now served as energy source for photosynthesis that spoke of biological processes unchanged since humanity's earliest days.
How long?
She asked, her voice emerging smaller than intended.
6 months. Started just after your contracts began changing.
His eyes met hers with understanding that suggested he'd noticed patterns she'd hoped to hide.
Figured if you were trapped in artificial worlds, at least one of us should stay connected to real things.
The admission cut deeper than intended criticism, slicing through protective barriers she'd built around her choices with surgical precision. While she'd been performing in Julian's escalating scenarios, enduring harassment that felt increasingly personal and violating, Micah had been discovering authentic rebellion through something as simple as nurturing forbidden growth. Her protective sacrifices suddenly seemed hollow compared to his quiet acts of genuine resistance. She'd accepted systematic degradation to secure their survival, but he'd been creating authentic alternatives that proved real choices still existed for those willing to risk official displeasure.
The risks?
She started, but her voice trailed off as she processed the implications of his secret activities.
Are mine to take.
His interruption carried gentle firmness that spoke to maturity, earned through months of careful cultivation.
Just like your contracts are yours. But this?
He gestured toward the growing plants with reverence that made her throat tight.
This reminds me that real choices still exist outside their systems.
The plant's leaves rustled softly as air circulation stirred them, creating whispered sound that seemed to carry secrets about resistance and growth and life that persisted despite systematic pressure. Around them, the pod's mechanical systems created their usual symphony of electronic maintenance, but organic presence transformed sterile efficiency into sanctuary, where authentic rebellion could flourish. For the first time since Julian's escalations began, Elara felt her chest expand with something other than anxiety. Not hope exactly, but recognition that alternatives existed beyond the binary choices that had seemed to define her world. Real earth beneath her fingers. Living plants that grew according to biological rhythms rather than programmed schedules. Authentic rebellion that proved human agency could survive technological dominance. The scent of growing things filled her awareness, pushing back against recycled air that had tasted stale for months. Each breath carried promises about possibilities she'd forgotten existed, choices that couldn't be eliminated through digital manipulation or systematic economic pressure. The tablet's chime cut through their quiet moment like digital violence against organic peace, harsh electronic sound that made the growing plant seem even more precious by contrast. Contract response required. Final notice #7 glowed across the screen with artificial urgency designed to trigger immediate compliance responses. Julian's legal AI prepared to deliver another round of escalating demands, its synthetic voice beginning programmed recitation with mechanical persistence that felt obscene against the backdrop of authentic growth.
Performance compliance deadline expires in 72 hours. Continued non-response will initiate breach of contract protocols with associated penalties, including, but not limited to, immediate termination of all revenue streams, housing eligibility review, and legal action for.
Elara swiped the notification away without reading the complete threat, surprising herself with the casual gesture. For months, each message had triggered immediate anxiety about potential consequences that could destroy their marginal stability. Now, with Earth Sense filling her awareness and authentic growth pulsing beneath her fingertips, Julian's digital harassment felt like exactly what it was: systematic psychological warfare deployed against her autonomy through artificial urgency designed to eliminate genuine choice.
7th one today.
Micah observed, his attention remaining focused on adjusting his plant's positioning for optimal light exposure. His movements carried practiced efficiency that spoke to months of careful cultivation, hands that shaped themselves around growing things with instinctive knowledge about nurturing rather than consuming.
You've been counting?
Hard not to. They're getting louder.
His voice carried disapproval that suggested he'd been processing the harassment's escalating nature with protective concern. That made her chest tight with recognition of reversed roles.
Sounds like someone's getting desperate.
Another chime announced an 8th message, this one marked with higher priority flags, that made the screen pulse with manufactured urgency. The AI's synthetic voice carried programmed emotional distress as it began reciting consequences that grew more threatening with each iteration. Digital theater designed to simulate human anxiety while serving algorithmic manipulation.
Delete the harassment.
Elara realized with crystalline clarity. Just like deleting Julian's scenarios that had grown increasingly violating over months of systematic escalation. Her finger found the notification dismissal with newfound confidence, swiping away digital coercion while choosing to focus on authentic growth that provided grounding against technological manipulation. The plant's gentle rustle, as Micah adjusted its support, seemed infinitely more real than artificial urgency generated by algorithms designed to simulate emotional pressure while serving corporate objectives. The contrast between organic growth and digital harassment struck her with profound recognition. One represented authentic choice that flourished through patient nurturing, while the other served systematic manipulation designed to eliminate alternatives through artificial scarcity and manufactured crisis.
Marcus taught you more than gardening.
She said, understanding flooding through her with liberating recognition.
Perspective.
Micah agreed, his hands continuing their careful plant care while his voice carried wisdom that transcended his years.
Before VR dominated everything, people made choices based on what actually mattered. Family. Growth. Real things that couldn't be deleted by changing code or eliminated through economic pressure.
The 9th chime arrived with flags that made the screen flash red, suggesting emergency-level priority that demanded immediate attention or catastrophic consequences would follow. But looking at Micah's steady focus on nurturing forbidden life, the technological theatrics seemed pathetically transparent. Performance. All of it performance designed to trigger fear responses through artificial urgency while serving systematic manipulation that eliminated authentic choice through manufactured scarcity. Understanding crystallized with liberating clarity that made her breathing easier for the first time in months. Julian's legal AI wasn't delivering legitimate business communications, but systematic psychological harassment designed to break down resistance through technological persistence that wore away, resolve like water eroding stone. Each escalating urgency represented calculation rather than genuine emergency, manipulation rather than authentic consequence. Corporate theater designed to serve algorithmic objectives, while disguised as professional communication that carried legal weight. Around them, the growing plants created atmosphere that felt increasingly sacred against the backdrop of digital harassment. Living things that responded to nurturing rather than coercion, growth that followed biological rhythms rather than programmed schedules designed to serve systematic manipulation. For the first time in months, she felt the mathematics shifting in directions that Julian's systematic pressure hadn't anticipated or prepared countermeasures against. The 10th notification arrived as Elara powered off the tablet entirely, its screen going dark with satisfying finality. Silence flooded their pod like clean water after technological contamination, washing away digital harassment while leaving only the gentle sounds that spoke to authentic life, persisting despite systematic pressure. Air filtration whispered overhead with mechanical consistency, but now she heard it differently. Not constraint, but cover for rebellion that flourished in spaces officially dedicated to sterile survival. The growing plants rustled softly as circulation stirred their leaves, creating organic symphony that filled spaces where digital harassment had been eliminated through simple disconnection. Without constant chiming of manufactured urgency, their cramped quarters felt transformed. Less like cage and more like sanctuary where real choices could take root.
Better?
Micah said, approving her choice with quiet satisfaction that spoke to months of watching her torment herself with systematic harassment disguised as professional obligation. She knelt beside him in the growing space, inhaling earth scents that seemed impossible in their artificial environment. Her knees found positions on either side of the improvised planter, while understanding dawned with profound simplicity that made her want to weep with relief. Her brother had found genuine rebellion while she'd been trapped in virtual performances, discovered authentic resistance through acts as basic as choosing soil over silicon, growth over consumption, nurturing over systematic manipulation designed to eliminate agency through artificial scarcity.
Tell me about the old ways.
She said, her voice carrying hunger for knowledge that had been systematically eliminated through educational systems designed to serve technological dominance rather than human flourishing. His smile carried knowledge that transcended his years, wisdom gained through secret learning about how people had lived before digital systems consumed authentic choice through manufactured convenience.
Before the collapse, families grew their own food, made their own decisions about what mattered without algorithmic interference, chose connection over convenience, nurturing over consumption.
The earth felt substantial between her fingers, grounding her in reality that no premium haptic system could simulate despite technological sophistication that blurred boundaries between authentic experience and artificial stimulation. Each grain of soil represented rebellion against systems designed to eliminate genuine choice through digital convenience that masked systematic manipulation. The growing plant pulsed with life that spoke of possibilities beyond the binary options. Julian's systematic pressure had seemed to create through elimination of alternatives that couldn't be controlled through economic leverage or technological dominance.
Marcus has others like this?
She asked, understanding beginning to reshape her perception of their district's social dynamics.
Hidden gardens throughout the building. People who remember that real choices still exist, despite systematic pressure designed to eliminate alternatives.
Micah's voice carried pride in community she hadn't known existed, resistance network that preserved knowledge about growth and nurturing and authentic rebellion.
Small acts that prove the systems don't control everything, that human agency survives technological dominance.
Around them, the pod felt transformed by organic presence that created atmosphere of possibility rather than constraint. The powered-off tablet lay silent, its artificial urgency eliminated through simple disconnection, while growing things created sanctuary, where genuine choices could flourish despite systematic pressure designed to eliminate alternatives. Real rebellion. Not virtual resistance performed for credits, but authentic choice that served human flourishing rather than corporate objectives designed to extract value through manufactured dependency. The plant's gentle movement as it sought light seemed to mirror her own growing understanding. While Julian's systematic pressure had seemed overwhelming when engaged with directly through digital channels designed to serve algorithmic manipulation, choosing authentic alternatives transformed the mathematics entirely. Not fighting digital harassment on its own terms, but selecting organic reality over technological manipulation that served systematic extraction rather than human flourishing.
They can't delete this.
She said, understanding flooding through her with profound relief that made breathing easier despite recycled air that had tasted stale for months.
That's the point.
Micah's hands continued their careful plant care, while his voice carried certainty that grounded her in possibilities beyond virtual manipulation.
Real things exist outside their systems. Real choices resist their control, despite economic pressure and technological dominance designed to eliminate alternatives.
The silence where Julian's harassment had been felt like liberation rather than absence. Space cleared for authentic growth rather than void awaiting digital content, designed to serve systematic manipulation through manufactured urgency and artificial scarcity. Their pod no longer felt like territory under siege, but fertile ground where rebellion could flourish through acts as simple as choosing Earth over electronics. Growth over consumption, nurturing over systematic manipulation designed to eliminate agency through technological dominance. For the first time since Julian's escalations began, Elara tasted air that carried hope rather than desperation. Not virtual hope manufactured through premium environments designed to trigger specific responses, but authentic possibility that grew from choosing reality over digital manipulation that served corporate objectives rather than human flourishing. The revelation settled into her consciousness with quiet certainty that felt like coming home after months of exile. Genuine rebellion began with seeds planted in real soil, choices made with hands that touched actual earth rather than digital interfaces, designed to simulate authentic connection while maintaining systematic control through manufactured dependency. Tomorrow would bring new pressures, fresh attempts at technological coercion, designed to force submission through elimination of alternatives that couldn't be controlled through economic leverage. But tonight, surrounded by forbidden growth and authentic rebellion, she understood that real choices still existed for those willing to choose soil over silicon, growth over consumption, nurturing over systematic manipulation. The mathematics had changed through organic processes that couldn't be deleted or modified through digital manipulation. And for the first time in months, the new equations suggested victory was possible through authentic rebellion rather than virtual resistance performed for credits that barely sustained survival. Chapter 23, Crossing Boundaries. The message bypassed every official channel Elara knew existed, appearing on her personal tablet like ghost transmission from territories that weren't supposed to touch her reality. No corporate routing protocols marked its passage through networks she hadn't known were possible. No AI monitoring flags triggered the systematic alerts that usually accompanied unauthorized communications. Just coordinates that materialized on her screen through underground channels that operated beyond institutional oversight, digital smuggling routes that served those with urgent need for unmonitored contact. Industrial District 12, Section 7, beneath the abandoned Hartwell manufacturing complex. The location meant nothing to her conscious mind, but something deeper recognized the significance of choosing territory where official surveillance grew thin enough to allow clandestine meetings. The sender's signature made her chest tight with recognition and nervous anticipation that sent electricity through her fingertips, where they gripped the tablet's warm edges. 5 Real-world meeting. Come alone. Important. His economical phrasing felt exactly like their covenant conversations, each word chosen with tactical precision that eliminated unnecessary exposition. But the implications sent current racing through her nervous system like touching live wire. Meeting Vance outside virtual boundaries represented crossing lines she'd never contemplated, stepping from digital safety into physical territory where consequences couldn't be undone through logout sequences or character restoration protocols. Her hands trembled as she input the coordinates into her tablet's navigation system, watching transit routes appear across urban landscapes, designed to discourage exactly the kind of encounter she was contemplating. 3 transport changes through districts that grew progressively less monitored. 2 security checkpoints where her movement would be logged, but not necessarily flagged for immediate attention. A final walk through territories where abandoned infrastructure created gaps in surveillance grids. The route painted picture of systematic journey away from institutional oversight, each segment carrying her further from spaces where AI systems maintained constant observation of human activity.
He knows something. Something important enough to risk real-world contact that could expose both of them to consequences beyond virtual character deletion.
The thought carried weight that transcended simple curiosity, implications that made her breathing shallow despite her pod's recycled air. In months of virtual partnership, Vance had never suggested crossing into reality. His careful boundaries had matched her own professional necessities, maintaining connection that served mutual support without complications that physical proximity might create. Their relationship had thrived within digital parameters that provided safety through artificial mediation. Avatar bodies that couldn't be truly harmed. Communication channels that could be severed instantly if circumstances demanded retreat. Virtual spaces where authentic emotion could flourish without real-world vulnerability. But Julian's escalating campaign had eliminated most boundaries already, systematic pressure that forced recognition of how thoroughly her digital and physical existences had become weaponized against each other. She powered down her tablet before Julian's legal AI could register the unusual routing patterns, choosing temporary disconnection over monitored compliance. The screen's death created sudden silence in their cramped pod, electronic absence that felt liberating rather than isolating. Space cleared for authentic decision-making without technological interference designed to channel responses toward predetermined outcomes. The coordinates burned in her memory like brands marking skin with permanent reminder. Somewhere in the city's industrial wasteland, Vance was waiting with intelligence that required real-world security to share safely. Information too dangerous for digital channels that could be monitored or intercepted by enemies with unlimited resources. Outside their pod's porthole, the city stretched in patterns of light and shadow that suddenly seemed navigable rather than constraining maze designed to discourage unauthorized movement. Each building represented potential sanctuary or threat, urban landscape that could provide cover for encounters that official systems weren't designed to monitor. The mathematics had changed through variables that couldn't be calculated from within virtual safety. Time to discover what that meant beyond digital boundaries, where authentic connection might finally achieve its full potential. Industrial District 12 stretched like monument to abandoned ambitions, derelict manufacturing complexes looming against gray skies that hadn't seen clean air in decades. The transport pod's door hissed open with mechanical finality, depositing Elara onto cracked asphalt that spoke of infrastructure decay beyond official repair priorities. Her boots found uncertain purchase on surfaces broken by years of neglect, each step sending small vibrations through concrete that had developed fault lines like geological instability. Twisted metal sculptures rose from abandoned lots where demolished factories had left only foundations and rust-stained memories. The air tasted of old industry and recent rain, metallic flavor that coated her tongue with recognition of spaces where human ambition had surrendered to economic obsolescence. But the abandonment created perfect conditions for encounters that institutional systems weren't designed to monitor or control. Surveillance networks operated most efficiently in territories where consistent human activity justified maintenance costs. Empty districts like this received minimal attention beyond periodic patrol routes that followed predictable schedules. She navigated crumbling sidewalks with careful precision, avoiding debris that could create sound signatures detectable by distant monitoring equipment. Each step carried her further from territories where AI systems maintained constant oversight of human movement, deeper into urban wilderness, where authentic choices could still be made beyond digital mediation. The Hartwell complex rose from its deteriorating surroundings like architectural ghost, massive structure that had once employed thousands in manufacturing processes, now obsolete through virtual simulation. Rusted scaffolding created geometric patterns against pale sky while collapsed. Loading docks spoke of industries that had prospered before VR consumed most physical production initiatives. Broken windows reflected nothing, their surfaces spider-webbed with fractures that caught afternoon light in prismatic fragments. The main entrance gaped open like mouths, frozen in permanent screen. Security barriers long since removed by scavengers who'd stripped anything valuable from the corpse of abandoned enterprise. But beneath the visible decay, she sensed presence that made her pulse quicken with anticipation rather than fear. Somewhere in this industrial graveyard, authentic connection waited beyond the digital boundaries that had constrained their relationship to virtual safety. She found him waiting beneath a section of scaffolding that provided shelter from both weather and observation, his physical form both achingly familiar and startlingly strange, after months of knowing only his avatar representation. Same careful eyes that had watched her navigate Covenant's dangers with protective intensity. Same quiet strength in shoulders that carried weight beyond normal concerns. Posture that spoke of readiness for violence, while preferring alternatives that preserved rather than destroyed. But filtered through reality's harsh light instead of magical enhancement, he seemed more substantial rather than less substantial than his digital representation. Authentic presence rather than projection, designed to trigger specific responses through haptic manipulation.
Elara.
Her real name and his actual voice sent warmth racing through her chest, despite the industrial district's chill. The sound carried undertones that virtual audio could never quite achieve, harmonic complexity that belonged to vocal cords shaped by real experience rather than programmed responses. No mystical authority or performed composure, just recognition between two people who discovered authentic connection, despite systems designed to prevent exactly such encounters.
You're real?
She said, words emerging before conscious thought could filter them through professional caution. His smile held gentle amusement mixed with something deeper satisfaction at finally transcending virtual limitations that had constrained their relationship to digital boundaries.
Most days?
He replied, voice carrying warmth that belonged to someone comfortable with existing in physical space rather than virtual projection. She stepped closer, drawn by gravitational pull that virtual proximity had never quite achieved despite months of synchronized magical abilities. The scent of him reached her before physical contact, leather and honest work mixed with soap that spoke of recent attention to cleanliness despite the industrial district's grimy atmosphere. Skin that carried warmth without artificial enhancement, presence that filled her awareness with authentic complexity no haptic system could simulate with such natural variation.
The message said important.
Her voice carried recognition that crossing into reality meant stakes beyond anything their virtual partnership had encompassed. Physical consequences that couldn't be undone through character restoration or log-out sequences.
Julian.
The single word carried weight that made industrial shadows seem darker, confirmation of suspicions that had been growing with each escalation of systematic harassment. Understanding crystallized with horrible clarity, puzzle pieces falling into place with mechanical precision that spoke to months of careful investigation. Whatever intelligence Vance had gathered required real-world security to share safely, information too dangerous for digital channels that Julian might monitor through corporate resources that transcended normal surveillance capabilities.
What about Julian?
She asked, though part of her already understood the answer from his expression alone.
I know who Malthus really is.
The revelation struck like physical blow, confirming fears she'd hoped were paranoid imagination born of systematic psychological pressure. Around them, the abandoned factory seemed to breathe with decades of forgotten industry, whispering warnings about institutional manipulation disguised as legitimate enterprise. Wind stirred debris across broken concrete, creating small sounds that seemed to carry messages about predatory behavior operating beyond normal oversight. In the distance, something metallic groaned with thermal expansion, urban decay creating symphony of abandonment that provided cover for conversations requiring absolute security.
Tell me.
She said, voice steady, despite implications that made her hands tremble with recognition of systematic stalking that transcended virtual boundaries. His hand found hers with contact that sent familiar electricity racing through her palm, but grounded in reality rather than virtual simulation, designed to trigger specific emotional responses. The warmth spoke of authentic connection finally transcending digital mediation, partnership that existed beyond systems designed to monitor and control human interaction. Calloused fingers that told stories of real work, pulse that hammered with genuine emotion rather than programmed responses, calculated to maintain engagement metrics. Physical anchor points that virtual relationships could never provide, despite technological sophistication that blurred boundaries between authentic and artificial experience.
Everything.
He said, voice carrying weight of intelligence that had required months of dangerous investigation to gather.
But first, understand this changes everything between us.
The industrial district stretched around them like urban wilderness, where genuine choices could still triumph over systematic manipulation designed to eliminate alternatives through institutional pressure. Whatever intelligence he'd gathered would transform her understanding of threats she faced, But standing in abandoned territory with his hand anchoring hers to authentic reality, she felt ready for truth regardless of its implications. For the first time in months, she occupied space where Julian's surveillance couldn't reach, with someone whose presence filled her senses with authentic rather than manufactured connection. The physical reality of Vance created foundation that no virtual relationship could provide, despite months of synchronized magical abilities that had seemed to transcend normal partnership limitations. Real world. Real connection. Real truth waiting to reshape everything she thought she understood about the forces arrayed against her autonomy. Time to discover what lay beyond digital boundaries where authentic partnership might finally achieve its complete potential. The intelligence files spread across the metal workbench, like evidence in systematic horror story that transforms theoretical threat into documented predation. Vance's documents created comprehensive picture of obsession wrapped in corporate privilege, each page revealing new depths of Julian's calculated campaign that extended far beyond normal gaming harassment into territory of institutional stalking. Investment records showing purchases that pushed beyond legal boundaries through shareholder privilege that eliminated normal oversight. Psychological evaluations documenting escalating possessive behavior that began in childhood when unlimited resources eliminated consequences for increasingly problematic actions. Schedule correlations that proved Lord Malthus's raids aligned perfectly with Julian's real-world activities, mathematical precision that eliminated coincidence as possible explanation.
He bought the identity.
Vance said, his voice carrying Deathrunner's hard-earned recognition of institutional predation that operated through systematic advantages. Most survival training ignored completely.
Original player died from reality withdrawal syndrome? Complications 6 months ago. Body discovered in immersion pod that hadn't been opened for 3 weeks.
Elara stared at the transaction records while understanding crystallized with sick fascination that made her stomach clench, with recognition of systematic preparation extending far beyond normal obsession. The timing aligned perfectly with Julian's discovery of her covenant position through corporate intelligence networks that monitored employee activities across multiple platforms. Systematic preparation that had taken months to orchestrate through resources only shareholder privilege could provide, patience that spoke to predatory planning rather than impulsive harassment escalation.
Account representing 5 years of Covenant survival, sold through black market channels for funds that could only originate from institutional coffers.
She read aloud, processing documentation that painted picture of corporate stalking, disguised as legitimate gaming activity. The abandoned factory whispered agreement through decades of industrial decay, broken machinery creating metallic symphony that provided cover for conversations requiring absolute security. Overhead, damaged skylights leaked afternoon light in geometric patterns that painted their workspace with natural illumination that felt authentic compared to artificial environments designed to trigger specific responses.
Illegal sensory modifications.
She continued, voice growing smaller as implications multiplied.
Premium AI tactical advisors specialized in psychological manipulation. Neural interface enhancements designed to blur boundaries between virtual and physical experience, until subjects can't distinguish reality from artificial stimulation.
Professional stalking, backed by unlimited resources.
Vance's analysis carried tactical precision that made institutional advantages seem less overwhelming through understanding rather than ignorance.
Operating across multiple platforms with corporate support, but still following predictable patterns that reveal fundamental limitations.
His proximity filled her awareness with scent of determination and honest purpose, reality that no virtual environment could simulate with such authentic complexity. The contact when his shoulder brushed hers sent electricity through fabric that felt more substantial than any haptic feedback she'd experienced. Warmth that belonged to actual human connection rather than programmed responses. The psychological profiles painted picture of someone whose understanding of relationships remained fundamentally transactional, despite unlimited resources that should have provided opportunities for authentic connection. Desired objects to be acquired through systematic application of superior advantages rather than mutual attraction or genuine compatibility. Julian expected rational actors who preserved themselves through cost-benefit analysis, victims who would eventually submit when alternatives were eliminated through institutional pressure that appeared legal while serving systematic stalking objectives.
He's never faced genuine resistance.
She whispered, recognition dawning with crystalline clarity that transformed despair into tactical possibility.
Exactly.
Vance moved closer, his presence providing warmth against the industrial district's chill, while his voice carried confidence born from surviving systematic predation that operated through institutional advantages.
Deathrunner taught me how corporate privilege crumbles when exposed to direct confrontation that eliminates operational benefits.
Wind stirred through broken windows, carrying scents of urban decay mixed with possibilities that couldn't be eliminated through digital manipulation. Around them, the abandoned infrastructure provided testament to what happened when authentic industry gave way to virtual simulation that served extraction rather than production.
What kind of confrontation?
She asked, understanding beginning to reshape her perception of seemingly impossible odds.
The kind that eliminates his systematic advantages through changing the battlefield entirely.
His eyes met hers with intensity that made her breath catch in recognition of tactical opportunity she'd never considered.
Julian controls digital channels, institutional systems, economic pressure points that operate through official oversight. But he's never operated outside those boundaries.
The abandoned factory seemed to pulse with approval. Decades of forgotten industry whispering agreement about authentic work, transcending systematic manipulation, designed to eliminate alternatives through artificial scarcity. Broken machinery and collapsed infrastructure provided evidence that real things persisted, despite corporate attempts to virtualize everything that mattered.
You're talking about real-world action that bypasses his institutional advantages,
She said,
I'm talking about changing the rules completely.
his hand covered hers on the workbench, contact that sent familiar warmth racing through her palm, while grounding her in authentic connection that couldn't be monitored or manipulated through digital channels.
He expects virtual resistance or institutional compliance. Binary options that serve his systematic control. Neither gives him direct confrontation with someone who's learned to survive through sacrifice rather than preservation.
Understanding dawned with liberating recognition that transformed systematic pressure into tactical opportunity. Julian's advantages assumed opponents who operated within boundaries he could control or eliminate through corporate resources. But Deathrunner survivors had learned to thrive beyond conventional limitations, to find victory through mathematics that rational thinking rejected as impossible.
the Blood Templar abilities.
She breathed, connections forming with crystalline precision.
Perfect counter to Necromancer, who expects victims to preserve themselves at any cost.
His voice carried certainty that made industrial shadows seem less threatening. Confidence that belonged to someone who discovered authentic purpose, transcending individual survival.
Some battles require risking everything because preservation becomes secondary to protecting what matters most.
The intelligence files rustled in breeze that carried sense of urban decay and growing possibility that couldn't be eliminated through systematic pressure. Julian's dossier documented predatory behavior that operated through institutional channels, but also revealed fundamental limitations in someone whose power existed exclusively within systems designed to serve corporate advantage. Change the battlefield. Force direct confrontation beyond his systematic advantages, where authentic connection could triumph over resource-based manipulation. Her hand turned palm up beneath his, fingers intertwining with contact that spoke of partnership, transcending virtual boundaries that had seemed so important only hours before. The warmth of his skin told stories of real work and honest effort, calluses that belonged to someone who'd earned strength through actual struggle rather than purchased shortcuts. The pulse that hammered beneath his wrist carried authentic emotion rather than programmed responses designed to maintain engagement metrics. Physical anchor point in reality that virtual manipulation couldn't touch or corrupt through systematic pressure.
What do you need from me?
She asked, voice carrying recognition that authentic partnership required trust extending beyond digital safety nets that had seemed so essential to their previous collaboration.
Complete trust.
Simple words that carried weight of everything they'd built together. Connection that had survived systematic pressure, designed to eliminate authentic relationships through isolation and economic strangulation.
Trust. In partnership that operates beyond virtual boundaries where real consequences can't be undone through logout sequences.
Around them, Industrial District 12 stretched like urban frontier where genuine choices could still triumph over institutional manipulation that served extraction rather than human flourishing. Whatever plan crystallized in his tactical mind would require crossing boundaries that neither had contemplated. But standing in abandoned territory with his hand anchoring hers to authentic reality, she felt ready for whatever mathematics their partnership might demand. The game was changing through variables that couldn't be calculated within systems designed to serve corporate advantage. Time to discover whether authentic connection could triumph over systematic predation, backed by unlimited resources, but constrained by fundamental limitations. Julian had made one critical miscalculation that his institutional preparation couldn't address through purchased advantages. He'd never faced opponents who'd learned to find victory through sacrifice rather than preservation, partnership rather than manipulation, authentic connection rather than corporate control designed to eliminate alternatives. Different rules, different mathematics, different outcome that served human flourishing rather than systematic extraction. For the first time since his campaign began, the equations suggested genuine victory was possible through authentic rebellion that couldn't be purchased or eliminated through institutional pressure.